But you had to get something unique. You had to catch a tipping point. The government leaders get it. It's amazing how often that's occurring in emerging countries or new challengers.
So you used the term transform a couple of times in the power of technology to transform. As it turns out, just last week, the movie Transformers 3 was being filmed here in Washington.
You're good on this. Did you ever think of another occupation?
Oh, John, you're making me blush.
Now, what we're doing also, I'm not sure where this question's going, so I'm trying to think of what is past. I'm trying to buy in some time to think about where it's going to take me.
It's going to be an easy one. It's going to be an easy one. It's what does the United States really need to do to transform itself and compete with these emerging markets?
It's a question that I think deserves a transparent answer, and I'm going to give you my impression. I think presently we're losing. We're getting beat on education. We're getting beat on innovation. Not working together. I'd give us both failing grades on our ability to work together. And other countries want to be like America. And yet we have all these natural capabilities and innovation, the use of IT, and the best innovative business system in the world. And yet we aren't working together, almost under the assumption that it was like when I was growing up, when 18 of the top 20 companies in the world are American. Today it's mid-single digits on its way to zero. We no longer can dictate terms, tax policy on a global basis. And so I think there are many areas that our business and government, if we just sit down and work, set out goals. Let's put America back to work. Let's use our assets differently. Let's rethink how we encourage companies to invest in America. Right now we discourage companies from investing in America. I'm probably the only Fortune 75 company that added 10% of our headcount in America last year. And I'm appealing to government to form a partnership with business, to look at issues like repatriation and quit arguing about it on an academic level. If you're unemployed in America and you have low prospects of getting a job in the next year, they don't want to hear us talk about academic theoretical discussions. They want to know, what can you do now that doesn't cost the taxpayer money to put us back to work? And so I think there are a lot of creative things we can do, starting with repatriation of funds. There's the stimulus package was what, $800 billion?
Right.
There's 1.2 trillion that American corporations have outside America that most of us would bring back, and would bring back if it were done at a very low tax rate. By the way, that low tax rate is what every... And 3 to 5 years from now, that door is going to be closed because Russia, China, Brazil, India, Mexico will require you to invest your profits in those countries. So this is something that's going to go away. If you could take 1.2 trillion, bring back 800 billion, pay the federal government 30 to 50 billion to do that, that's the size of the whole stimulus package, which produced jobs at about $100,000 to $1 million at the cost of the taxpayer per job. This is one where you can create jobs, you get companies much stronger. When you see an ability not to have to do a layoff, or you see the stock go up as a company, the CEOs take more risk. There are a lot of basic issues we could go after are not effective on either side, and I hold both sides, including myself, accountable for doing a better job here. I think we can put America back to work, and I think we've got to say, let's do it together. Let's quit non-constructive dialogue, and let's make it happen.
I appreciate that transparent answer. Let's talk a little bit about leadership and your thoughts on the key skill sets to be an effective leader.
You know, it's interesting. It doesn't matter whether it's a small company, a big company, or even government leaders. I get the unique chance because of our role in high tech to talk to almost every government leader in the world, almost every single business leader in the world, and small companies and big companies, and the characteristics are remarkably similar. Great leaders are able to do 3 or 4 things well. Set out a vision and a strategy for a company or a country. Understand how that strategy is going to be different than what others have done, therefore you could have a higher probability of achieving the vision. Second thing they do is they surround themselves with people, develop them and recruit them. They can implement that vision and strategy. And the third thing, and I didn't understand this becoming a CEO at first, you develop the culture, your DNA. You help influence what you want to be as a company or as a country. And the fourth, as basic as it sounds, you've got to be the communicator, the cheerleader that really sets out the vision, that pulls the company with you in terms of where you go. And so it is amazing each time I talk with a government leader or a business leader, I'll ask them, one thing that you've learned in your career, what would it be that would help me or help others? And it's like today, Dean, I'll get more out of this than I give to the group about you and your questions. But it is amazing when they give you answers how much they are very, very accurate and how much it comes to bear later in helping you run a company, etc. So listening is the last thing I would do. And I never get listening confused with, the only thing worse than asking somebody, what do you think, is when they tell you and tell you what you do, and then you don't do it. Right. You're better off not asking.
I try to tell my kids that they're not listening. They don't bought into it.
How old are they?
They're really young. They're 10 and 7.
It gets worse. But then past the teenager years, they come back. But it's worth every moment of it. But I think it's those type of characteristics. And so as leaders, I think the ability to listen, but also act on listening. Act on what you hear.
Are those skill sets that are innate, or are they ones that can be developed over time?
I think you can develop them over time. And I think all of us have a capability to do that. If I would draw an example, we're an old-fashioned company in some ways, and in other ways we move with extreme speed. We can do an acquisition of a $3 billion company from the first meeting, have it through approvals, board of directors in a week. Wow. And we've done 141 of those in an industry where 90% fail. 70% of ours have hit or exceeded what we told our board of directors we would do. So an ability to develop skills are very much there, but you want to teach people why do you do what you do and the balance. An example would be, as a company, I know every illness of every employee, their spouse, or their children is life-threatening. 70,000 people, extended family of 250,000. That's when your employee, Cisco family, needs you the most. We're there for them uniquely. Now, it isn't just the CEO who does that, although I have to start. You've got to lead from the top and walk the talk. But now it occurs automatically. It's deep into our DNA. So I think as a leader, part of your job is to explain to people where you're trying to go, the vision, what are the elements of your culture, here are the skills you think are important to do. And every company will have, or every country will have different, perhaps, attributes. But you've got to say, here's what's important to us. So the answer is, yeah, I think you can teach that and learn it. And then when you have people that can't become a part of that, as tough as it is to say as a leader, it's probably better they're somewhere else. Right. And it isn't about behavior modification. If a person really doesn't care about their peers, if they're looking out for what's best for them or their own group at the expense of the company, they're, at least as far as Cisco goes, better off doing it somewhere else.
Actually, a lot of the folks in this audience work with the federal government, and so your last point touches on something that would be useful to get your advice for a person working in the federal government who wants to be a leader and an innovator but is running up against barriers, the risk-reward ratio. What advice would you give that person to break through and continue developing their leadership and otherwise innovating?
Okay. So I'm going to assume that the base of a lot of people in the room is a technology base. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay. So several questions you've raised. The first is, I realize in government the risk-reward standard deviation is tighter, and I think unfortunately it has to be practical. But I think government risk, you never achieve anything really differentiation. You've got to understand as an IT leader the role of IT is playing, and if you want I can go back to the Clinton Global Initiative from just 2 weeks ago. There's a rapid transformation occurring with business and government leaders, the early adopters. IT is now deeply embedded in how business and government works, where before you used to talk business process, government process, and then there'd be a commercial on IT, and people said, I believe in it, and then go on. Now almost everything that we'll do, from healthcare to education to connection with the citizens to defense, will be with a network fabric behind it of IT and change things dramatically. So I think IT is not only back in vogue, and you see the U.S. government leading, both in defense but also in many of the civil agencies, really leading for the first time in probably 2 to 3 decades. When I first came into the industry many decades ago, the government used to lead. It hasn't for several decades. In the last, in 5, 6 years, you've seen that change in most attributes. So part of it is realize IT can be the enabler for rapid process change, rapid governmental change, and some of the things people would have considered impossible are now doable. Healthcare that not only doesn't go up 10% a year, but actually could decrease and improve the quality of the healthcare. Transforming healthcare almost into the home. Being able to deliver virtual healthcare into Appalachia or to Indian reservations in Montana. The ability to bring a higher level of healthcare to everyone in the country over time at a lower cost. And so I think the first thing is to understand the time is probably now that IT can play a dramatically different role, and obviously I have a bias toward the network being the platform for that. But the second thing is you want to identify where your leaders are. So when I make a sales call, as basic as it sounds, the first thing I ask the leader of a country or of business is, what are your top 5 priorities? Right. And I very quickly in my mind map how many of those can we help on. Now what's exciting is when I get those top 5 priorities out of Russia or out of Charlotte, North Carolina from the mayor there, or out of Mexico, we can align with most everyone. Then we work with their team to deliver on it. And so understand what your leaders' objectives are, understand where you can make a difference, and then as basic as it sounds, as you start to implement these, don't necessarily go after the highest payback one. Go after the one with the group that will support you. Because very often the most successful groups within government or business are the same. They're the slowest to change. For me, it's my sales organization. So I usually lead with manufacturing or operations first, and then get the successes going. And then paint the vision of what you can do together, because if people know what the vision is and buy into it, or at least feel they had a chance to participate, there's almost nothing you can't do today. So I think, Dean, we're on the front edge of a 3 to 5% productivity gain as a country for a decade. Wow. Now that's only been done one time before. It was done from 97 through 2004. And Cisco called it in 97. Ask Alan Greenspan, asked Laura Tyson, who was President Clinton's economic advisor. We called it and we showed the chart on why it was going to happen. It was the first phase of the internet. You're about to see it happen again with this new technology areas: collaboration, video, clouds, virtualization of data centers. What they really do is allow any content to any device, often in video, and suddenly you can dramatically drive productivity at a faster pace. We're growing our productivity at Cisco at 22% year over year. That's revenue per employee. Off the charts. It's actually too fast. I got to add more headcount. And we did the same thing in the 90s as this first wave came about. So I'm saying not only is it time is now for IT, I'm saying with these new technologies that are much easier to use, and it isn't just the engineers who know how to use it now, you and I can use it very effectively as our parents could or our children can. I think you're going to see tremendous transformation. Long-winded answer to your question, but I know